read by our esteemed Governor General. Given the need for social distancing and the special nature of this Parliament, a larger and more appropriate setting will be used for the sitting at which elected members will be sworn in as members of the National Assembly, and the Speaker and Deputy Speaker will also be elected. More details will be issued as we get closer to this event. The Clerk of the National Assembly, Mrs. Sonia Body Thompson, and the team are preparing for this historic event. The inaugural sitting of our Parliament outside of the traditional venue highlights the need for the National Assembly to have its own home. The new Speaker of the National Assembly will be mandated to coordinate this effort from site selection, designs, drawings, budgeting, and building to actualize this new home for our Parliament. The National Assembly is at the fulcrum of the Westminster model of democracy. Since 2015, our Team Unity administration has done much to advance the Parliament's role in nation building. We have met more often than in the past. We have passed legislation that ensures that a motion of no confidence is heard within a 21-day period. By so doing, we have prevented the past travesty of justice, when the bygone regime held a motion of no confidence in abeyance for a long period of 26 months, reducing the Parliament, in the words of one jurist, to an instrument in futility. The Public Accounts Committee has also been strengthened by my administration, giving parliamentarians greater scrutiny over the financial affairs of the government. This Parliament, of course, will complete the review of the statutory rules and orders of the National Assembly, which was started last term, in order to ensure their relevance to the evolution of time. The strengthening of the Parliament, improvements in its efficiency and efficacy, will contribute to the safer and stronger future for a democratic St. Kitts and Nevis. During the campaign for our re-election, we placed people at the heart of our agenda. The safer and stronger future is for all of us. It is what each of us wants for ourselves, our families, our communities, and certainly for our beloved country. 5 years under my leadership, much was accomplished for all Nevisians and Kittitians and residents here. An unprecedented season of peace, low crime, and in particular, significant reduction in gun-related homicides has been realized. A record number of persons were put to work. The economy grew every year under my watch. These were not chance events, and we cannot gamble with our future, or our people will suffer. My government has always been generous with our employees. In terms of fiscal surpluses, for example, we have shared some of it with our federal employees and those of the Nevis Island Assembly administration, with 4 consecutive double salaries, a record in the context of St. Kitts and Nevis, and indeed the wider region and the world. The Financial Secretary has advised that, in particular as it relates to the Nevis Island administration, $29.4 million were made available for the payment of double salaries to employees of the NIA and public sector entities under consideration there. Having listened to our employees, we propose to enhance their job security during this term. My government will be a model employer, and in this regard, we are working to provide the best possible conditions of work to all government employees. We expect all government employees to be punctual, diligent, loyal, efficient, and effective in the delivery of services to the public. We intend to hold every employee to that standard. We are committed to regularize two major categories of public sector employees who were victimized by the past regime. These are our government auxiliary employees, referred to as GAEs, and our step workers. The government auxiliary employees, formerly referred to as non-establishment workers, were promised by the former regime in 2007 that their employment status would be enhanced. That enhancement would have allowed such workers to receive a pension on completion of 15 years of service. Regrettably, the former regime stubbornly refused to honor this commitment regarding entitlement to pension. My administration in the last campaign pledged to correct this injustice in 2020. I am therefore pleased to provide an update on this significant progress that we have made so far. Since the general elections of June 5, 2020, we have set up a STEP Regularization and Pensions Reform Committee to advance our policy regarding STEP workers and the government auxiliary employees more broadly put. The committee comprises several dedicated public servants. It is chaired by Mr. Levi Bradshaw, our Accountant General, and it comprises the following other officers: Mrs. Carla Pike, a forensic auditor, and our Director of Audit, Ms. Sheridane Warner, the Chief Personnel Officer, Ms. Sharon Ratton, Mr. Ron Collins, and Mr. Andrew Skerritt, Permanent Secretaries, Mrs. Versily Francis, Representative of the Ministry of Finance, and Ms. Nishama Ratton Mack, Representative of the Legal Department, and Mr. Emil Green, who is the Director of the Skills Training Empowerment Program, better known as STEP. I was able to meet with the committee earlier this week. I was impressed by the high level of engagement, their appreciation of the urgency of action, and their commitment to carry out this exercise to the best of their abilities. I want, therefore, to thank the civil servants for responding so positively to this opportunity to serve on an important policy matter. I am reminded that we are all we have to advance the cause of nation building in this, our beloved federation. The committee has made the following recommendations, which I share some of these. 1, that the regularization of the employees on the STEP should be undertaken on a phased basis, commencing with the 36 staff assigned to the Secretariat and the 1,849 workers assigned to the public sector, both on the island of St. Kitts and in Nevis. The regularization in this context would entail a change of status for all STEP employees, as they would now enter the public service as government auxiliary workers or employees with a new hire date of 1st July 2020. The second important recommendation calls for the reviewing of the financing arrangement of the STEP to ensure compliance with Finance Administration Act 2007, including the funding of wages assigned to the public sector consolidated fund. 3, the establishment of the Government Auxiliary Employees Commission to handle matters of recruitment, appointment, the exercise of disciplinary control, suspension and dismissal, as set forth by the Government Auxiliary Employees Act 2012 at sections 4, 5, and 6. 4. The preparation and ratification of the regulations for the Government Auxiliary Employees Act of 2012. Since 2012, no work had been done in terms of the regulations, and we have advanced a subcommittee headed by Ms. Sharon, Mrs. Mack, to lead this particular effort at getting the regulations as soon as, in collaboration with the Department of Legal Affairs. It is recommended that there be a temporary freezing of new entrants into both the STEP and the public sector to facilitate the completion of the financial impact and projections by the Ministry of Finance. 6. A re-registration exercise of businesses and workers assigned to the private sector will be conducted. The STEP workers are in public sector and they are in private sector. And it is recommended that those in the private sector, there has to be an updating of their record and their status. And so that exercise will start. Of course, we have less control over those who are attached to private businesses than we have with respect to those who are working in various government departments and statutory entities. There will be the conducting of a public awareness initiative geared towards sensitizing the STEP employees, and I'm advised by Mr. Emil Green that this has already started, and the heads of departments across the government regarding the transition process and other human resource policies and benefits of the government using a range of media platforms. The provision of the government health insurance coverage to all STEP workers, commencing with those assigned in the public sector. These are the principal recommendations that have come forward this week by the committee that has been working so very hard to assist us in actualizing and fulfilling the commitment to STEP workers in particular and the broader group of government auxiliary employees. I want to reiterate that by September 2020, all matters with respect to the government auxiliary employees will be properly put in place. And that is why at Wednesday's meeting, in order to advance this work, we establish, or the chairman established, a number of subcommittees that will work diligently, perhaps every day and certainly every week, to ensure that time is not lost. In addition to this major shift being contemplated in the status of our government auxiliary employees, it should be recalled that on about 2018, my government restored the honorarium of about 2% of the gross wages that was paid to the GAE or non-establishment workers. This sum was denied them since about 2012. And we took the decision until the government fulfilled the commitment made and legislated in 2012, we would restore that honorarium. We kept our word. Speaking about the government employees, I now turn attention to our police at the Special Service Unit. And I see ACP Adams here. He doesn't know what I will say. The SSU will be relocated to a new beautiful headquarters at Fort Lansbastia, and the date Mr. Brandy advised should be before Independence 2020. I want to use this opportunity to commend the Commissioner of Police, Mr. Hilroy Brandy, and his High Command for outstanding work over the past few months in very stressful circumstances occasioned by the following: the pandemic, the enforcement of the state of emergency, and of course, general elections. And equally as I commend the police, I want to extend those same commendation to the entire security apparatus, including the Defense Force, the customs, the fire, the prisons, because all of them work very hard, really, to keep us safe. These general elections of the 5th June 2020 were the most orderly and the best managed to date, a stark contrast to those of February 16, 2015, when there was tension and confusion over the voters' list. In 2015, shots were fired in the vicinity of the police station in Connery. Fast forward now to 2020, the police reported no major incident. All was peaceful. For this we give God the glory. We note that the independent overseas election observers concluded that the 2020 general elections were free and fair, and that they reflected the will of the electorate of St. Kitts and Nevis. We thank the independent CARICOM expert team of election observers for their work and for coming to St. Kitts and Nevis even in the midst of a pandemic. We thank, of course, our own independent local general election observers, drawn from the NGO coalition, for their work and their contribution to our democracy. This independent local team has also concluded that our general elections were free and fair and free from fear. In sum, the general will of the people was reflected in the outcome of the polls. My greatest thanks go to our people for their discipline and wisdom and for choosing our Team Unity candidates. We are now a government in service to all the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. The hard work to secure the safer and stronger future continues, and I call on all of us to be and do the best we can today. Our security forces will be called upon to go beyond the call of duty again with the upcoming work during our independence celebrations and indeed the hurricane season. In this regard, I should remind the public that the Honorable Akila Byron Nisbet chairs the 2020 Independence Celebrations Committee, and the Honorable Byron Nisbet will be ably supported by our Deputy Prime Minister, the Honorable Sean Richards. The Honorable Vincent Byron Jr. continues to serve on the Mitigation Council, ably supported by the Honorable Wendy Phipps. It is remarkable that in less than 1 month of our second term, our government has been able to make substantial progress on 2 very important manifesto commitments. It shows that our leadership is focused on the people. I lead a people-centered government. Additionally, it shows that leadership matters. The country has a leader and cabinet that our people can trust. Our word is our bond. By keeping our eyes on the ball, over 4,000 government employees, 3,000 plus on the STEP program, and over 1,000 in the existing pool of GAE workers are being made better off. Better security of tenure, especially for our STEP workers, who can now more easily access loans, visas, etc. Better benefits, including pension entitlement by government auxiliary employees. Yes, the safer and stronger future our Team Unity administration promise is being delivered. In our national dialogue and the very popular Leadership Matters program, The Financial Secretary and I discussed the critical role envisaged for our CBI program in our agenda for the safer and stronger future, and in particular our efforts to contain and reverse the recession and put the country back on a path of growth and development. We anticipate that there will be some new interventions with respect to the CBI program, and in that regard, I can report that we have taken a decision to make some revision to the contribution program as it relates to a family of 4 persons. The contribution, which is now at US $195,000 for a family of up to 4, will be reduced to $150,000 as part of a limited time offering. And then we looked at on Monday the need to provide some assistance to the real estate option, and in that regard, part of the recommendation was for the stamp duty payable to be reduced to about 2.5% over the same 6-month period, a limited time offerings with respect to the 2 options. These initiatives, we hope, will stimulate market demand, enhance our competitiveness in a market challenged by wealth loss occasioned by the dislocation of the global economy by COVID-19 and the greater uncertainty and risk which hovers over the entire world as a consequence of COVID-19. We stress that these are time-bound offers. These resources will help us to continue our safety net programs, reduce poverty and indigence, and support the build-out of our economic infrastructure and Nevis and Sinkage, while enhancing our fiscal and economic resilience. On leadership matters too, a caller gave a reminder that the cannabis marijuana industry needs building out. Truth is, we agree. And I assure the public that this is part of our plan to create new jobs, higher income streams for our people, and expand our pathways for growth and development, particularly at this difficult economic time around the world. A medicinal cannabis authority will therefore be created in due course, and its job will be largely to manage and regulate the industry. The government will ensure that priority is given to locals in the development of this industry. The Medicinal Cannabis Authority will be responsible for issuing various classes of licenses relating to cultivation, processing, transportation, dispensing, manufacturing, and export, etc. It is our wish that St. Kitts and Nevis can become the hub for foundational science of cannabinoid medicine internationally, and that we can take advantage, among other things, of the private research facilities on island that have international repute, to expand our contribution to global public health products and services. We will appoint a marijuana czar in due course to champion this industry, as we realize, as the caller reminded us, that time is of essence. I want to pause at this time and to allow for any questions. Thank you. I gather that I said the Team Unity holds 7 out of 11 seats. I should say that we held 7 out of 11 seats, and that we now hold 9 out of 11 seats. So the past was 7 out of 11, force of habit, and the present situation is that we now hold 9 out of the 11 seats. I want to thank those who are listening so intently to give me this quick opportunity for correction. Thank you. Any questions from the media?
Ken Richards, Win FM. Dr. Harris, I want to know if St. Kitts and Nevis has any thoughts on what is happening to LIAT in terms of the proposed liquidation and the forming of a new company. I also want to refer to the Charlestown Accord. Premier Brantley recently said he was looking forward to talks with you in relation to the share that Nevis gets from the federal purse. I want to know to what is the status of the Charlestown Accord and if those talks are likely in the very near future. Thanks.
Any other question from the media?
Good morning all. Prime Minister, Glenn Bart, SKN Newsline. One of the questions I have concerns, if I may ask, about the state of the economy, the state of the finances of the country, especially over the last 3 months. With very little revenue coming in, there must be some amount of loss with regards to the various interventions you've had. Secondly, in relation to the hotel sector, I would like to get a further understanding as to what are the redundancy laws, because there are some complaints from some workers at Marriott and Hyatt and some other areas in which they want to have the choice to be made redundant, and apparently there is some pushback, some resistance to that. I have 2 other questions, but I can defer those until later. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other question? We will take one other media rep.
Good morning, Alicia Daniel Blake, Sugar City, 90.3 FM. Prime Minister, during your last Leadership Matters virtual forum, you mentioned or implied that St. Kitts and Nevis would be taking part in the upcoming tourism season, the latter part of this year. So the $1 million question, when will the St. Kitts and Nevis borders be opened to passenger traffic? Also, Minister of Tourism, CARICOM, has revealed that it has formed a Caribbean Tourism COVID-19 task force. And among activities, it's setting guidelines for moving around the CARICOM space, including a real-time COVID-19 app. Minister Grant, can you provide more detailed information on this app, as well as possibly the progress of the CARICOM COVID-19 task force?
Mr. Grant, is it that you wanted to come first? I see a movement in your direction. But I will start with the opening of the borders and to thank the questioner for that particular one. We put into perspective and context why the border was closed. The border was closed as part of an intervention deemed necessary everywhere to control the probability of the coronavirus impacting too many persons, challenging our health systems, and therefore resulting in death. The advice to close the borders had come from our health professionals in collaboration with the National Emergency Operating Center. We have always said that health comes first. If we want a healthy economy, we must have healthy people engaged in that economy. Since 2007, the region has adopted the mantra that the health of the region is the wealth of the region. We have said, and we are aware, that we will have to move to open up the economy. And we have been doing just that in a very sensible and organized way. We move from lockdowns, 2 days limited business operations, to 4 days, to 5 days, to now 7 days. And by doing all of those, we allowed more and more economic activity to take place. We have moved from the closure of our manufacturing sector to a point where our NEOC has been able to develop appropriate protocols, and the 7 entities engaged largely in export manufacturing now are all at work, with nigh 73% of their workers back on the job. And with respect to the largest entity, work is being done to prepare the physical space to deal with the new requirements with respect to social distancing, which have to be observed. We have said that internally, as we do those things, we are doing many other things to prepare St. Kitts and Nevis to be ready to engage the global community as soon as all is reasonably well. And that determination of the wellness will come from a number of factors, including, of course, the counsel on which we had relied upon for all these weeks, that is the health people, who will give the government a sense of the exposure and the risks attached to the opening up of the economy. That, of course, will not be the only input into decision making, but it will be a critical one. It will be the critical one from the vantage point that that matter had become an imperative supported by the World Health Organization if we were to minimize again people dying ultimately from COVID-19. We are looking at what is happening around us. Some countries are determined in Europe and elsewhere that they will open up because either way it is a difficult challenge. And we have seen in many of those instances they are forced to close back up again, in a manner of speaking, because the pandemic has spread in ways that they had not anticipated. And so we are guardedly optimistic that some point in the future, having regard to the long period in which we have been able to hold the virus in containment on the face of it, that the health professionals will be able to come comfortably to cabinet and to make recommendations. I want to make the point that we are actively engaged in regional discussions with respect to the opening up. So it's not that we are alone or we represent an oddity with respect to this particular matter. And everywhere the countries are saying that they will do certain things in phases. And of course, in the context of the prescription from the World Health Organization, ultimately every jurisdiction, having looked at the template, must make the determination in its national interest. Last week, for example, I think it was, or earlier this week, we had a meeting of the CARICOM heads. Well, Monday it was, because we were in cabinet. We had the former senior minister, Amory, and Ambassador Osborne, who has responsibilities for CARICOM matter within the office of the Prime Minister, to sit in on that meeting and to get a sense where the region was in relation to COVID-19. A lot of work is still being done, and a lot of consultation is taking place between CARFA, between PAHO, between WHO and our local health team. And the regional professionals are attempting to find a consensus on a very difficult matter. The short answer is that we are looking optimistically, Ms. Daniel, to the day when it will be reasonably safe enough for us again to open up our borders without risking the overwhelming of the health sector and death to our people. Because ultimately we do the contrast. You could well say open up tomorrow, and that perhaps can be done with just a phone call. I don't know how easy it is. But you do that, and then you have the consequences. Let's face the reality. What are you going to be opening up to anyway? Almost all the airlines are going through a period of reorganization and reconsideration of routes and of other matters in relation to safety and how they are going to advance their participation in the marketplace. And that is so whether it is in Europe or in America or in the Caribbean region. So what it is we are going to be opening up to becomes a question, and one which we have to get answers to in terms of the practical elements. The challenge is, do we do things in a willy-nilly way? People become sick. They may go out, earn $100, but the health bill becomes $3,000. And you do the arithmetic of that, and you could see that we have to be deliberate, thoughtful, and careful, and wise in what we do. We have a record of being all those things, and we will continue to do so. It brings me then to the matter which Mr. Richard raised with respect to LEAT. LEAT has been with us for a very long time. I think I gathered maybe 60 years listening to the Patrick's program last night. Straight talk, it has been around. It has had various bouts of difficulties, insolvency issues which had to be remedied. It seems it's at a crossroads now, and we are not clear of what the program will be with respect to LEAT, because now emerging from Monday are different policy preferences being put forward by different leaders of member states in CARICOM. It seems to me, and based on the report I had from our attendees at that meeting on Monday, there is no clear consensus that has emerged with respect to LEAT's liquidation or LEAT's future. We are hearing, based on the news, that there is an idea of a LEAT 2020. We are hearing that there is an idea that some member states are looking at other airlines which are smaller and which they believe represent a better proposition. Does St. Kitts and Nevis have a view on such matters? We have strong views regarding the importance of a regional transportation mechanism and network. We have established, when the first bit of conversation had come about regarding where LEAT goes, we established a committee. We activated it, drawn from private sector and public sector. And I believe it was last week I had asked the financial secretary to ensure that the committee remains active and sees of these matters. I should say to you, with respect to the conversations on LEAT, no formal documentation has been put before my government. And my understanding was that none was available during the meeting. At least none of the attendees for St. Kitts and Nevis was able to share any. And so what we have at best are ideas for which more substantive and substantial work perhaps will be needed if we are to convince ourselves and our population regarding where we go with LEAT and any other alternatives with respect to LEAT. We have always, as a country though, been supportive of regional initiative. And when LEAT needed help, we were among the first to have made available substantial sums. The Financial Secretary may recall, I suspect it may have been close to $1 million. And we had said that we were prepared to make that initial contribution and to work with LEAT to find a resolution that satisfies us in terms of the number of flights LEAT would bring to the island of St. Kitts and to the island of Nevis, the costs and other issues. So those matters, and we started because LEAT then had put in place a technical team that was visiting member states, and they visited and made presentation to our cabinet and engage our members of our team, and in particular those in the Ministry of Finance. So we continue basically to look to solutions to the problem of regional interconnectivity. LEAT is one option that has been of very good service to all of us. We would want to be a constructive partner in the discussion for resolution of this matter. The ideas are now coming up. Some of them are controversial from what we hear, assuming the accuracy of what is being reported. Some of them are very controversial among member states. So we wait for some of the heat to die down. We wait to get something formal in writing from those who are contending different options. And we are happy. Outside the box with respect to the appropriate model that would give our people affordable travel in a regular and consistent way. And when we have a chance to see the paper, when we have had a chance to benefit from the presentation, St. Kitts and Nevis will share with its citizens our perspective on the way forward. In the meantime, the committee which we have established should sometime in the course of this week be meeting again to bring themselves up to date and be in a position at any moment to give appropriate advice to the government with respect to that matter. The matter of the status of the Charlestown Accord, which has been raised. Again, I just want to make the point that we are by nature a consultative government. A consultative government. So there will always be room for ongoing conversation. And I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of the details with which Mr. Richards is perhaps more familiar. Suffice it to say, on all matters, we are part of a cabinet, and it will not be appropriate for me or any member of the cabinet to prejudge a determination of sensitive matters which must be handled in the context of the cabinet structure that we have. And we have committed to that. We have had this discussion on several occasions. So there is no need, in my view, for constantly going through that, because we have the work to do in making determinations. In preparation for the budget last year, for example, we committed to a 50% increase in the transfers that we will make from the federal budgetary resources to the Nevis Island administration. And that has been happening. And more has been happening. But we don't need at this point to make a public discussion of a matter which we are committed to. I think in our manifesto, we would outline clearly that we have accepted a way forward that will bring professionals to assist in consideration of how the financial flows are going to go. And then we will take it from there. So we have a framework We have expressed that framework, we have had discussion on this matter, and therefore we are working on it. Again, we are a consultative government, and the cabinet as a whole will look at the Charlestown Accord and look at any other accord, look at the manifesto, look at the Constitution, look at all the advice that can be available to us for us to make a decision that upholds the principles of unity, the principles of solidarity, the principles of consultation which should guide a government such as this one. So that would be my response with respect to that. Mr. Barth raised the issue of the redundancy. And again, the laws are clear with respect to the matter of when the redundancy can be triggered. I am not yet, or we do not yet have the presence of the Attorney General nor the Minister of Labor. Both of them are in attendance at a CARICOM meeting when they're here, or when they are sitting at the wrong spot. I apologize. But we have Minister Phipps who is here, who I would invite to say something without going into specifics, because these matters are matters which are being negotiated, and we do not want to get ourselves ahead of the considerations which are now rife. Except as a policy, this government is committed to uphold the law. And this government would want our employees to get all of their benefits. I want to remind all of us that we are in unprecedented times, which force the closure of Marriott, of Coy, of Park Hyatt, etc. And we therefore have to take note of the abnormality and to be wise in how we are going to develop a framework for negotiation, because the long-term good must be to keep the people on the island of Nevis and the island of St. Kitts employed for as long as possible. And that is what we want as we work to get the economy back on a pathway of growth. And we will do everything. We will consult with workers, we will consult with the employers to ensure that a reasonable and satisfactory arrangement is being put in place. Though Marriott has been raised, the same situation would affect other employees, and it's for that reason I would want to just, as it were, focus, because to me what is important is to get the principles that will guide all situations of this nature that have similar fact base surrounding them. I want to invite the Minister of Labor to add some more value to this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister, and good morning to all. However, I think you were batting quite well in terms of your response, and I just wanted to reiterate the tone with which you would have responded to the question, and to put into context the situation in which we find ourselves. As you so rightly said, Prime Minister, we are in unprecedented times, trying to navigate our way through uncharted waters. St. Kitts and Nevis, like the rest of the world, has been confronted without our approval, without our preparation, by COVID-19. And yes, the majority of our revenue flows come from tourism and the allied services sector, and as a result of that, every facet of that tourism sector is of prime importance to the government and people of this country. By extension, St. Kitts and Nevis is also a member state of the International Labour Organization. We have been since 1996, and it is at a juncture such as the COVID-19 experience that we need to remind ourselves what being a member of the ILO means. And I would do so in a nutshell by explaining that the International Labour Organization operates from the standpoint of tripartism. By that it means that we strive among the member states for an ideal consensus-driven relationship to exist between the representatives of workers, i.e. unions or employee groups that might be undefined, by the labor administration function, in this case meaning the Department of Labor, the Ministry of Labor, and also by representatives of employers, that is the private sector. And as a result of that, the approach to management labor cooperation that should exist the world over is that whatever is done on behalf of workers in terms of economic stabilization, guaranteed employment, particularly the decent work agenda of the ILO, is done by consensus. So having said all of that, this is the time that we should be putting our membership in the ILO to the test. And that is precisely what the Prime Minister is getting at. We have engaged in discussions with the management teams of the various establishments, especially those who are most going to be affected. We would have done so basically with the Park Hyatt. We would have done so with the Marriott. We would have also done so with Royal St. Kitts Hotel. And up to 48 hours ago, we would have made overtures to the management teams of those institutions to facilitate a discussion with the employee base, whether they're done in sections or as a group, so that we can get on the same page. Because while it is true that according to the Protection of Employment Act of 1986, after 12 weeks of a furlough or a layoff period, as we know it more commonly, it is possible to trigger severance, either by the employer seeking to do so or by the employed person seeking to do so. But the law is very open-ended on that. At the same time, it says it may be done because it leaves room for negotiation and to build consensus and a positive way forward. Now, while it is true, yes, that persons may wish to exercise the right to redundancy, redundant claims take time to work out. We also must recognize the fact that we are operating under a system where this government has generously provided a multiplicity of social safety nets to afford us the ability to continue living a decent way of life during this pandemic, the end of which none of us knows. For example, preceding the COVID-19, we would have had in place the Poverty Alleviation Program for qualifying applicants, $500 a month for persons earning less than $3,000 a month. We also had, predating that, the voucher program, which gives grocery support to deserving families. We also have a foster care program, which is very well funded for persons who have chosen to look after children without proper parental structure. And of course, we then had the $1,000 stimulus that was provided, not for 1 month, as in the case of most CARICOM member states, but for 3 months thus far. So these are all of the issues on the table we would wish to consider moving forward, because there are certain nuances in the law which I don't care to get into at this point because it is not my purview, and the Attorney General is best suited to deal with that. I should also state that the Ministry of Labor has sought a legal opinion from the Attorney General's chambers as to the best way forward, which will help to inform the discussions that we plan to have with management and workers' representative, of course being facilitated by the government, specifically through the Ministry of Labor. But I will tell you, however, that in terms of one of the most popular questions being raised insofar as whether or not somebody can claim a long service gratuity and still claim severance, the short answer to that is no. It is one or the other. So these are some of the very germane considerations that we would wish that people understand, and that is the reason why we are offering ourselves up to meet with the workers and the management to explain the ramifications of some of these choices. Because when somebody severs their employment, either by his or her choice, or it is done by management based on the provisions of the Protection of Employment Act, if things turn around, there's no going back from that. In other words, you could not have left your post in housekeeping at the Marriott, claim to be a severed staff, or claim redundancy to trigger severance. And then when things turn around, or if you don't get a job, you cannot then come back to ask for the same job. Okay? So it's a matter that what happens to us once we begin to prepare to open our borders. Because we would wish those workers that we have now, the present stock who are already trained, to be able to fill these jobs when the time comes. So as I said, there are certain nuances and delicacies that would have to be worked out, and this is a time more than ever before for us to treat with the employment situation, unspecified and ambiguous as they might be right now, from the standpoint of consensus building. So that is the bulk I would wish to say on this matter, Mr. Chair, at this point.
Thank you. You've done a good bulk. I want to thank our Minister of Labour for that helpful response, and of course she is available and we are available to provide more information. What was important is that she has noted that the consultation has already begun and that she herself has been providing leadership in terms of the outreach to a number of entities. I'm aware up to yesterday herself and the Attorney General, along with others, I suspect, would have been involved in attempting to grapple with this very important matter. How do we deal with a very delicate matter which has to be treated in a fair way? And at the end, we want the very best for all of our workers. Our workers come first, and everything that we do, we will try to see how we can advance their cause. We ask for some patience as these matters are being worked out, not just with Marriott, but with the other entities in the hospitality and tourism sector and in other sectors too, as the case may arise. In the meantime, persons are aware and persons have been benefiting from the stimulus package, more particularly the $1,000 a month assistance that had been made available. And on Tuesday, we were advised by Mr. Maynard, who is here, the Director of Social Security, that up to $22 million will be paid out during the course, well, at least by day's end. And that is way beyond the $15 million we had originally planned. That is because the government policy has been very flexible in attempting to accommodate as many persons as possible, given that these are abnormal and difficult times. We want to have the most compassionate response coming from the government. We also want to encourage the employers to do the best that they can too for their employees, because it seems that every employer wants the government to be the backer and supporter of last resort. Employers must have some minimum standard of support that they will provide to the employees who have served them so faithfully in good times. Mr. Grant, you want to add anything to the question by Ms. Daniel, or that has been? She identified you.
You've spoken so long, Prime Minister.
Forget. Ms. Daniel, can you repeat the question for Mr. Grant?
Sure, no problem. It's specific to the fact that CARICOM has revealed that they have started a CARICOM COVID-19 task force, and one of the processes that they have implemented was the institution of an app that would be used within the CARICOM space to identify COVID-19 patients, etc. So maybe you can shed some more light on that, as well as maybe any further progress that the task force might have had.
Well, just a short answer to that question is that when you asked it in the first instance, I actually leaned over to my colleague Mark Brantley and asked him if he was aware if anything had crossed his desk, and he had said no. And I could say the same. So at this point in time, we can't advise you on that particular matter. What I would say, however, in terms of the whole issue, Mr. Prime Minister, of borders, etc., we have been doing a lot of consultation also. Consultation with the hoteliers, consultations with the airlines, consultation with our health officials here to determine what phased approach we will take to opening up our borders. And you must appreciate it's a real balancing act. It's one health against the economics of the country. And so whatever decision we arrive at will be arrived at in the best interests of the citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis. In fact, we last held a meeting that's tourism with the health team this week. We intend to have a follow-up meeting next week, Tuesday, at which time we might be in a better position to alert St. Kitts and Nevis as to the way forward. We understand what is happening and we appreciate these are critical times. These are unprecedented times. And just we are asking you to bear with us because we are all affected by this pandemic. Particularly the tourism industry is getting a beating. As it stands now, the airport is basically closed, seaports are closed, there's no revenue coming in, yet the government is paying out substantial sums. And so the government is also under pressure. And so all we ask is that the citizens understand that the same way that you're going through your difficulties and challenges, so is the government. And we ask for your patience and your commitment going forward. Thank you.
I want to thank the Minister of Tourism for that response. Senator, apologies, force of habit. The Honorable Byron, our Minister of Health, had said to me that our local NEOC is also looking at the matter of apps. Apps have emerged as one way to perhaps achieve greater effectiveness in terms of contact tracing. There is a view that as you open up your borders, you're going to need to have these special devices so that people can be alerted when persons suspected, quote unquote, of having COVID-19 is nearby. And so this is going to be a delicate matter. Issues of privacy and issues of what you do and so on. All those things are being looked into, and our own local persons, we want to commend them to continue that. This is part of the talent development which we would want to see our people become involved in doing their very best. But it just shows the complexity of the challenges we face now in the context of COVID-19. We have a little time left if there are any further questions from the media.
Good day. I'm Lashan Dixon, St. Kitts and Nevis Observer. Two quick questions. Are there any plans this term to develop or expand other drivers to the economy that are potentially less vulnerable than tourism? And also, what are some of the major legislative agenda items that we can expect this term, and are there constitutional amendments possible given that there is a mandate for it? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other question?
Prime Minister, recent elections coughed up a number of election petitions, one from the Team Unity side and several from the opposition Labour Party. Can you comment on that at all?
What do you say? I would say that persons are exercising rights in the context of our democracy, in the context of our constitution. We do believe that those that have been put forward by the opposition are frivolous. We do believe that they will fail. We do believe that they're vexatious too. We do believe that they reflect a view that the Labour Party under the present leader is not learning and it's not moving forward. The reality was that we draw effectively that contrast during the campaign. It was the future or the past. Persons have chosen a future. The Douglas Labour Party is stuck within the past, and almost predictable. A man who, a second time in a row, has lost general elections. Instead of coming and say clearly, I have lost, it is the will of the people. I will step down. I will allow somebody else to lead the party to a new era of excitement and development. He comes, as he did in 2015. In 2015, Douglas did not concede the general elections. In 2015, nearly 5 prime ministers called Denzil Douglas, spoke and Win FM radio program, calling upon Denzil Douglas to concede the election and allow the country to move forward, because it was clear, with all he had been and all he had done, the people of St. Kitts and Nevis wanted change. It was Nigel Carty, to his credit, who conceded eventually. And up to this time, Denzil Douglas finds excuses as to why he lost in 2015. And it's the same old leader, same old party structure, same old response in 2020. So 5 years after, nothing has changed, nothing next gen about Douglas Labour. And so we put that in the context of the choice already made. I mean, I read the statistics which shows that between the last 2 general elections, the Douglas Labour Party has lost some 2,000 voters. I read the statistics which reveal that the Douglas Labour Party has had its worst showing since perhaps 1952 in terms of the percentage of the valid votes it has been able to get. That must be in an ordinary, any other party, a wake-up call and a time to have a new conversation about the future. Nothing new has come from them. With respect to our own challenge and that of the member, Mr. Ian Patches Libard, I think we are satisfied, and our lawyers are satisfied, that he has a case of merit. He has the services of some eminent lawyers from around the region. And one thing I know about his legal team, they don't take cases if they are clear that they are going to lose. They're not going to waste the court's time, and they're not going to waste their client's time. So we are satisfied about that. And again, we are satisfied too that at least two different entities, by and large, looked at our elections and concluded that in the main, it doesn't mean that every particular isolated situation, but in the main, taken as a whole, the general elections reflected the will of the people. And I just want to read a small part of the NGO Coalition final report of the Election Observation Mission for June 5th, 2020, of the federal election in St. Kitts and Nevis. And this report is dated the 24th of June. And the members of the commission are the St. Kitts Evangelical Association, the St. Kitts Christian Council, and the Chamber of Industry and Commerce. And this is what it says on the conclusion. I read in part. The NGO Coalition Observer Mission's conclusion is that despite a number of administrative and organizational setback and inconsistencies, the polling day activities, from the opening of the poll, voting throughout the day, the counting of the ballots, and the declaration of the results of the June 5, 2020 federal elections in St. Kitts and Nevis indicate the said elections were administered by the Electoral Office and the other stakeholders in a manner where they were free and fair and free from fear. The mission's assessment of the day's activities is that the voters were able to cast their ballots without intimidation or harassment, and that the results of the elections reflect that the people freely voted for the candidate of their choice on election day. You can't get anything clearer than this. This is an independent group that came forward, and their words are essentially in substance the word of the overseas observer team. So that is where we are at. With respect to the question, and you look also, just want to make that last point, of the behavior of the voter in constituency number 6. Well, the leader knows that time will tell a lot of things. The leader, for all his experience over the last 30 plus years of elective politics, the leader of the Labour Party knows that number 6 is now up for grabs. Within a week of the general election, a candidate was launched and created such dynamism and action. For the first time in that constituency, you record a significant swing against any Labour candidate, and in this case over 14%. Clearly, the people of St. Christopher 6 knows. People of St. Christopher 6 know that it is time to try something new. And we will continue to encourage them in that regard. The question raised with respect to other areas of economic engagement is an important one. It is one which is always challenging for small island states like ours, because we have limits in technology, in capital resources, in land, in people, etc. And all those are important to growth. But I would say in the last campaign, we had become so in awe of the talents which our young people throughout St. Kitts and Nevis were showcasing. We were so impressed by the excellent support we had from about 4 companies who manage our virtual campaign, Open Interactive and several others, that we say no. There's a lot of hidden talent in St. Kitts and Nevis, and that we have to find a mechanism that allows them to come to work, create jobs, create income for our people. Hence, we came up with the idea of a ministry for entertainment, entrepreneurship, and talent development, all of them interconnected. And I am hoping, as our new minister, Mrs. Akila Byron Nesbitt and her team, get to work in fleshing out first the policies through consultation with a wide cross-section of young people and people generally. We will be able to excite some interest and action in those areas. Around the world, for example, entertainment is $1 billion industry, which brings significant foreign exchange earnings to countries like Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, to a lesser extent. What if we can, with the imaginative power for young people who are a class act, and deliver the virtual campaign that is now going to be copied elsewhere? So that is one area we have identified, entertainment and so on. And today, and on leadership matters, we did in fact go to the matter of the build-out of the cannabis industry as a critical new area of engagement, focusing on science, focusing on its contribution to public health, and building, importantly, on a platform we already have, perhaps not well publicized, about tremendous work we have been doing at high scientific level at our primate facilities in St. Kitts and Nevis. Right here for years, we have been doing research on Parkinson's disease. Right here for years, we have been doing important research in reproductive mechanisms. Right here for years, we have been doing research on a range of ailments impacting upon the brain. What if we could bring our reputation in that particular field and leverage it as we build out our cannabis industry? So there is a lot of potential. We just need to get better organized to deliver on these things more quickly and in a way that brings the greatest good to all the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. In terms of the legislative agenda, I won't go ahead and preempt the Governor General. It would be normal in the throne speech, which will be delivered on the 8th, that there will be a conversation with respect to the legislative and broader agenda. But certainly, having regard to our manifesto proposal, there will be consideration of a number of constitutional matters, the matter of electoral reform, the matter of term limits. All of those things are matters which we can now confront, having regard to the mandate, to use your word, that has been given to the Team Unity administration. So more about this you will hear when the Governor General read the throne speech on the 8th of July, which is sometime next week, probably next Wednesday. So we are not far from that. Again, I want to thank the media representatives for coming today, for spending time. I am happy that we have been able to use more expansive spatial settings that allow for the social distancing and physical distancing. I am also appreciative of the Farc and the Minister of Health, Byron, Eastman, asked me to say that she was very delighted that more persons are wearing masks. I want to thank you too for abiding by those prescriptions. And I notice some people are now taking out theirs from their pockets. It's always good to have them. But it shows then that our people are committed to do the necessaries. So thank you again for coming, and we hope that you will help us in spreading the news and sharing information as we make a very noble effort to keep our people informed. Thanks to all the representatives of the media, and may God continue to bless our country and our people. Thank you again.